Today we'll be talking about Nosferatu, a classic German love tale and an accurate representation of what it's like to be a German female. Written and directed by Robert Eggers, a known lover of eggs, who is well renowned for his love of the word "the", with such classics as The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and now The Nosferatu. Robert's modern retelling is a remake and reimagining of the 1922's Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, a movie about a bunch of weird Germans doing a bunch of weird German stuff. A film which in itself is an unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, because copyright, much like morality, is completely optional. And much like many of my first dates, the movie immediately begins with a woman crying due to extreme loneliness, and like the average religious person, she hears voices in her head. Begging for some kind of companionship with something or someone, she walks towards her balcony, where we then see the shadow of Mr. Nosferatu himself. She swears herself to whatever this is that she's communicating with, before somehow ending up outside on the grass, where she's then grabbed around the throat by some kind of creature that appears to channel the power of epilepsy directly into her, causing her to have a seizure on the ground, or as I like to call, trying to be the center of attention. Years then pass, like they unfortunately tend to do, with Ellen now appearing to look exactly the same age, due to the little known fact of Lily Rose Depp sacrificing newborns to keep herself eternally youthful. The year is 1838, and Ellen is now married to a man named Thomas, with the pair now living in the fictional German town of Visburg, in the fictional German country of Germany. Thomas is an estate agent who's about to finally hit his big break in order to be able to purchase a house and provide for his wife. His boss Knock tells him how much he wants to bang his wife before giving him the opportunity to sell a property to an eccentric rich man named Count Orlok. The only downside of this transaction is that Orlok is too old and frail to come and visit the home before purchasing it, so Thomas must make his way to him instead at his current home in Transylvania. Upon revealing this information to his wife and how it will financially secure the pair for the rest of their lives, she tells him she doesn't want him to leave because she really likes being difficult. She then proceeds to tell him about a dream of their wedding night, except it wasn't with Thomas, but with death itself, and it's the happiest that she's ever felt. Somebody get this girl some Prozac. Weird dreams and weird wives aside, Thomas is going to finalize the deal anyway, and in the meantime, Ellen will be staying with their affluent friend, Friedrich, and his wife Anna, and their two young daughters. Because apparently women must be supervised at all times by a male, otherwise they might accidentally summon an ancient demon or something. After Thomas drops Ellen off and embarks on his journey with a locket from his wife containing a strand of her hair, we then see his boss Knock engaging in the traditional German pastime of sitting naked on a floor and getting splinters in his ass. Surrounded by candles and etchings on the ground, he prays to his lordship, saying that he's sending Thomas to him. Yeah, but did he need to do it naked though? Time passes, and eventually Thomas makes it to Transylvania, where he arrives at a remote village in the woods, where he's immediately embraced by the dancing and singing locals, until he isn't, and they all begin laughing at him and tell him to leave. That is, at least until he offers to pay double the rate to stay for the night, which magically cures them all of their sudden laughing affliction. And after falling asleep at the inn, Thomas wakes up in the middle of the night to the sound of something strange and disturbing outside. Romanians. He watches as a naked woman rides a horse, getting a really unfortunate carpet burn in the process, as elderly women sing and chant. Because how dare our paying guest be able to sleep in peace? He follows them deeper into the woods towards a makeshift cemetery, and accidentally reveals himself by being a little bit of a baby, as one of the men digs up a grave from the ground and stakes one of the corpses, causing it to scream and puke up bile. Suddenly, Thomas wakes up back in his bed as if it were all just a dream, but looks down to see that his shoes are covered in mud, alluding to the fact that outside is indeed dirty. Leaving the inn, he notices that the entire village is gone, along with his horse, in the ancient Romanian tradition known as stealing your stuff. He's forced to climb his way up the mountainside on foot like a peasant, before passing a bridge protected by a shrine of crosses, because apparently God only listens when you spam him. After an entire day of walking, in the distance, he sees an unmanned carriage riding straight towards him, with it then suddenly appearing right in front of him, with its door open inviting him on. He then forgets about the basic concept of gravity and just kind of floats onto the carriage, and in a delirious state, it takes him towards Count Orlok's castle. A castle which he suddenly finds himself in front of, as he appears to have unlocked the ability to fast travel. After entering through the gates, he sees a shadowy figure watching him in the distance, before following him into the castle. Inside the castle, he sits at the table with Count Orlok, who proceeds to read the deed to the property. Thomas, seemingly unsettled by Orlok's presence due to his fear of old Romanian people, becomes genuinely terrified of him as he shouts at him to stop talking, before he demands that Thomas has something to eat. And after accidentally cutting himself while slicing bread, something which appears to get the attention of Orlok, as apparently he's quite like the bug chaser, Thomas then finds himself sitting in front of the fireplace and watches as a statue turns its head and looks towards him. After taking one too many of those edibles last night, Thomas then wakes up on the floor of the room the next morning before discovering that he's been given a non-consensual forbidden love bite and has a puncture mark on his chest. Despite Orlok being into some apparent freaky stuff, Thomas sticks around for the Count to sign the document later that evening, where he then asks to see the locket containing his wife's hair. The locket that he proceeds to violently sniff because he's a bit of a weirdo. After Thomas insists that he leaves this place, he once again suddenly wakes up and looks down to see the bite marks in his chest. In a desperate panic, he attempts to flee the castle, but the front gates won't open. Overcome with the extreme and sudden urge to be a bit of an idiot, he then decides that his next best idea is to break his way into Orlok's family crypt. Inside, he finds a coffin decorated with the same mark seen on Orlok's seal, as well as the same mark that Nock was rubbing his bum cheeks all over earlier. Fancying a look at a dead person or something, Thomas then decides to open a coffin to unsurprisingly find a dead man inside. After breaking into this man's property and desecrating the dead, Thomas then picks up a pickaxe and attempts to do what he saw in the woods the other night and swings it towards the body, causing the man to wake up and grab it. The man being Orlok, who likes to sleep naked. Thomas then runs back into the castle and locks himself in a room, before Orlok proceeds to use his excellent manipulation skills and compels Thomas to open the door that he's hiding behind. Orlok wraps his hands around Thomas's neck and bites down onto his chest again, as they then both begin to float above the bed, because Thomas's blood is just that good. And using the locket that he didn't give back to Thomas, Orlok begins huffing it once again like a big weirdo, as we then see Ellen back in Germany, walking around in a trance. Friedrich, who she's staying with, calls a Dr. Sievers to come and attend to Ellen, who diagnoses her with the unfortunate affliction of having too much blood, and recommends that Friedrich ties her to the bed, because we can't have a woman wandering around the place now. Thomas suddenly wakes up from his non-consensual puncturing session, and attempts to climb out of the window to escape from Orlok's dogs, before falling into the rapid river below. And Thomas's boss, Nock, seems to have gone a bit mad since Thomas departed on his journey, and has been discovered at the local market killing sheep with his bare hands and eating them raw, resulting in him being locked in Dr. Sievers' dungeon, because every good doctor has a secret dungeon. He's been killing rats while in there, and Sievers watches as he bites the head off a pigeon while rambling about his lord. And after he's done having a bit of a light snack, he then runs at and tries to attack Sievers. After a strange encounter with the short hungry man, Sievers then pays a visit to Friedrich to tell him about Nock, and that he's been rambling about the same types of things that Ellen has been while she was suffering from her seizures. He tells him that he knows of a man named Professor Franz, otherwise known as the Green Goblin, who might be able to assist them. A man who was kicked out of the university he worked at due to his beliefs in the occult, as apparently they're racist against goths, because it's perfectly acceptable to believe in angels, but once you start talking about the devil, everyone thinks you're insane. Back in Transylvania, Thomas is discovered by a nun washed up alongside a river, where he's then taken back to their church and blessed in some kind of ritual, with one of the nurses saying that the devil has preserved his soul, so his corpse may walk in blasphemy. And knowing that Orlok's got a bit of a hard-on for his wife or something, Thomas needs to get back to her as quick as possible, as we then see that Orlok has sent himself to her via boat, which seems to be the long way around now I think of it, considering that Romania and Germany share the same landmass. And while Orlok is busy Amazon priming himself for next day delivery, Friedrich and Sievers proceed to visit the professor, who seems to already know why they're here. Franz is then taken to meet Ellen, and she tells him that she suffered with night terrors and seizures her entire life, but they stopped after meeting Thomas, but now that he's gone, they have returned. He witnesses one of her episodes and deduces that she's communicating with another realm, so rationally, he decides that the best course of action right now is to stab a needle all the way through her wrist and out of the other side. And while in a trance, she tells him that she sees the spectre of death and that he's coming. Franz begins performing a ritual to make her speak some more, but instead she'd much rather twist and contort her body while showing off her really cool dance moves, leading Franz to believe that she's not just having seizures and fits, but that she's possessed by something. On the ship that Orlok has been using to transport himself to the city, people have begun dying on board and being found with puncture marks in their chest, meaning that they've either got quite the kinky cannibal on board, or that there's a vampire hiding somewhere. One of the men thinks that it's got something to do with the chest that they're transporting, so goes below the deck to destroy whatever's inside, but after opening it, he discovers that it's a box full of rats, because no one ever expects it to be a box full of rats. Orlok then decides to grab him from behind to give him a big old smooch on the neck for being such a good boy. Nock, who's been held in captivity for the unfortunate crime of being a little bit weird, has managed to tip over the chair that he's restrained in and has begun foaming at the mouth. One of the guards notices him and attempts to help him, giving Nock the opportunity to grab the man's head and bite a chunk out of his neck before giddily skipping away and shouting about how his lordship has arrived. And just as Thomas makes it back to Ellen, barely clinging on to consciousness, the ship transporting Orlok and all of his rats has crashed into the port of the city, unleashing the hordes of the plagued vermin. Orlok is now at his newly legally purchased residence and tells Nock that he needs Ellen, but he can't take her by force. The only way for him to get what he wants is that if she willingly repledges her vows to him, just like she did all of those lonely years ago before meeting Thomas. With the rats come plague, and after investigating some of the plague-ridden bodies, Franz discovers that they also contain puncture marks on their chest, as well as containing no blood, which he recognizes as a sign of a vampire, Nosferatu. In the middle of the night, Ellen is visited by Orlok, and she seems to recognize him and isn't scared by his presence. He tells her that he slept for 4 centuries alone until that day she communicated with him, and ever since then, he's been completely enamored by her, but she continues to resist his pull. With the start of their new loving and healthy relationship dynamic, he tells her that she has 3 days to submit herself to him, or he'll down Thomas like a bottle of Mountain Dew, killing everyone that she cares about in the meantime. When suddenly Ellen wakes up back in bed, as apparently Orlok's got quite the thing for making people wake up from dreams, before she then looks over to see Anna laying on the floor being consumed by rats, as they mistake her for a large piece of cheese. Anna survives the initial attack, but begins exhibiting the same symptoms that Ellen did when Thomas was away. She can feel the approaching darkness, as she's felt Orlok's touch. Bro's really gotta stop touching people. By now, the entire city is overrun by plague, as bodies litter the streets like modern-day Birmingham. Franz and Sievers search Nock's estate agents for any clues about his beliefs, before discovering a shrine containing a human skull, as well as the carvings in the wooden floor beneath the rug, which also happens to contain a few skid marks. After discovering a book amongst Nock's possessions, which explains the Nosferatu and how it needs to be willingly accepted by a woman, Franz comes up with an idea that might stop the plague and defeat the evil creature, otherwise known as a Romanian. A Nosferatu must sleep where it was once buried come sunrise, that being the coffin that Orlok has transported with him. The only thing is that they don't know what will happen if he doesn't sleep. They're gambling that it will kill him and stop the plague, and considering that's their only option, that's what they decide that they need to do. Speaking alone to Thomas, Ellen confesses that she knows who Orlok is, and that she's responsible for bringing the curse to the city because she was just a bit lonely. She explains that many years ago, while all alone, she called out to something for companionship, and he answered her. It then appears that she forgot to take that Prozac that we were talking about earlier, as she then suddenly turns on Thomas, blaming him for causing all of this, as Orlok has begun to infiltrate her brain, before she then begins to seize and roll her eyes into the back of her skull, like I've just shown her my Pokemon card collection. And after coming back to reality, they are then overcome with the uncontrollable urge to rub knobbly bits together, because they know that Orlok can sense what they're doing, so they decide to cuck him. Friedrich's wife Anna wakes up in the middle of the night to the sound of her children screaming, and unable to wake Friedrich up because he's a bit lazy, she rushes into their room to discover them being consumed by Orlok, who then turns his attention to her. The next day, while at the funeral for his pregnant wife and 2 children, Friedrich spots Ellen and begins shouting at her, blaming her for causing all of this hysteria, until Thomas shows him the bite mark on his chest to prove that this evil is real. And with no other option but to put a stop to this, Franz realizes that Orlok must be keeping the coffin at his new manor, so they need to make their way inside of it to destroy it. Friedrich, suffering from the plague himself and grieving from the loss of his family, makes his way back to their resting place to spend one last moment with them. But while in there, he proceeds to get a little bit weird about it and rip the top off his wife's casket before making out with her cold, pale corpse. And right in front of the kids, no less. Have some dignity. Thomas, Sievers and Franz have been waiting all day for Friedrich to show up so they can begin their attack, but after he doesn't arrive, they discover him dead from the plague, or just dead from kissing dead chicks, laying on top of his wife's body, and then they decide to set it all on fire, because no one needs to see all that. Ellen, using her mystical womanly powers, calls out to Orlok to lure him away from the manor, giving Thomas, Sievers and Franz the opportunity to make their way inside and to find his sarcophagus. Expecting to find Orlok inside, opening it and immediately plunging an iron spike in, they realize that it actually contains Nock and his now new belly piercing, and not Orlok. He's gone for Ellen, causing Franz to hammer the pike deeper into Nock. All along, Franz knew that Orlok wouldn't be in there, and he's deliberately let Ellen sacrifice herself to save the world from plague by telling Thomas that Orlok would be at the manor. But with Orlok not here, Franz is able to destroy his resting place, hopefully destroying him, as Thomas begins sprinting his way back to his wife. His wife was already dressed up in a wedding dress and accepting Orlok's vows. They start to kiss and undress, showing me things that I wish I'd never witnessed in 1,000 years, before Orlok bites down onto her chest and begins to feed. Unable to resist Ellen, every time he tries to stop feeding, she tells him to keep on going, and despite the sun beginning to come up, that's exactly what he does. Once he realizes what she's doing, it's too late as she looks at him smiling as the sun begins to shine through the bedroom window, resulting in Orlok crying and puking up blood, making a right mess of the place. By the time that Thomas eventually makes it back to Ellen, they're both already dead, as she's killed him with her vagina, and the movie ends. So before we bring this video to an end, I'd like to just give a big shout out and a massive thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who go out of their way every month to continue help supporting the channel, something which I greatly appreciate. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great support to the channel, but you also get access to a few little perks, like being able to join our private Discord server, where you can then get links to uncensored versions of all videos going forwards. So starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a big thank you to Dom Comau, Mai, Matthias, Jojo, Larry Smoke Productions, Dark Gamer HD, Die, Gavin Stevens, Zaza Lord, Marius Hawkland, Veltalum, Derek Drop, Blue Malamute, Virtually Anything Edits, Dewati, Celogram, Abhijith Nair, Helia, Caleb, Gregory, Kolak, Conrad, Ashley Taylor, Joseph Markovich, Mia, Wandering Soul, TXC0, Pineapple, Pem is in Bunhole, KJ, Durbimbo88, John McMahon, Blessed Baby, Tyler Wazensky, Derek, Mark Rapaculo, Panda Panda, and Henry the Ninja. And now making our way over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to Tony Ho, Lost Gemini, Will Jenkins, Dylan, Colin Cole, V-Beats Production, Gripped, Christoph, Pascal Cathers, Dayton, John Tretolt, Speedlacer, Bloody Boy, Andrew Powell, Lolita, Winston Smart, Thomas Harris, My Wife's Son, Flareon's XV, Drummond Tobias, Susanna Ostrowski, Robert Johnson, Tristan Shillingford, Salami, Cahill Husband, and Hero Bread. So once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.